Superhero movies nowadays are a dime a dozen, and if you want to succeed as a superhero movie, you need to either bring something new to the table or tell a really, really good story. So let's talk about 2023 The Flash. The Flash is the 5th superhero movie that has come out this year. We're only 6 months into this year, and we've already had 5 superhero movies. So, how does it stack up against the other movies that have come out this year, and did it bring anything new to the table? So the movie opens with Barry Allen going about his day-to-day life. He's trying to get food before he goes to work, and while he's there getting food at this coffee shop, he gets a call from Alfred letting him know that Batman needs help figuring something out in Gotham City. Barry goes and helps Batman, and there's this whole opening sequence with falling babies and microwaves, and yeah, everyone's making fun of it, and for good reason, because it's such a dumb sequence. It looks so silly. And then Barry Allen continues going about his day. A big point of the beginning of this movie is that Barry works for the precinct in order to try and clear his dad's name. That was set up in the Justice League, and is part of Barry's story, and we find out that Barry's dad's court hearing is going to be the next day. Later that evening, he goes and he's talking to his dad on the phone, and he's reliving kind of the memory of how his mom died. And it makes him so sad that he runs, and he runs so fast that he goes back in time to earlier in the day. So he confides in Bruce Wayne later and tells him that maybe he could go back so far in time that he could change events. And Bruce tells him that this is a horrible idea and that he shouldn't do it. So Barry decides to kind of let it go, and while he's at his house, Iris West walks into his house and gives him the idea that he doesn't need to actually interact with his mom and just needs to make sure that the tomatoes that are the cause of his mom's death are in the cart when she checks out so that she's fine. So anyways, he goes back in time and he makes sure she has the tomatoes, and then as he's going forward in time, he gets kicked out of the time loop by this strange alien creature. Barry thinks all is well and good, his mom is alive, and then realizes that he isn't in 2023. He got kicked out in 2013. So he's not the only version of Barry that's alive. Barry, who is age 18, is also alive. And so various shenanigans ensue. Old Barry ends up losing his powers while trying to get new Barry his powers. And then General Zod comes in. There's a lot of things that happen. They end up having to go to see Batman. And Michael Keaton's Batman, honestly, was super cool. I really, really liked what they did with Michael Keaton's Batman. I thought he was phenomenal. He slipped right back into the role from when he had it in the 80s and the 90s. And it was just a super, super fun character. The three of them decide that they have to go rescue Superman so that they can defeat General Zod, who has returned. So they go to this Russian facility and they rescue Superman, who isn't Superman, it's Supergirl, Kara, instead. And they take her back to Wayne Manor. Once Kara recovers, she decides that she's not actually interested in helping the humans and she flies off. And so Barry and Batman decide that they need to get Barry his powers back. So they basically set up a thing to electrocute him. It doesn't work. Kara comes back and she's the one who takes Barry up into the sky and gets him hit by the lightning. This then pushes us into the third act, where we go into this CGI mess of a battlefield, and there are some cool shots here, like I will admit that, but the action set is so bland that it's kind of hard to watch for a long period of time. We hit the climax of the movie. There's a lot of weird CGI and Barry realizing that he can't go back and save the day, and that sometimes the problem doesn't have an answer and it just needs to be let go of. And there's this whole paradox where young Barry has been trying to go back in time this whole time, and he has to sacrifice himself to break the loop. Old Barry goes back in time to when he put the tomatoes in his mom's cart, and this was actually a really, really nice scene. I thought that the actors played it really well. It was very emotional. And then Barry, after saying goodbye to his mom, returns to the present, and his dad's court case works just fine. The charges against his dad are dropped, and he walks out, but things are slightly different. And that's basically the movie. So How was it? Like I mentioned before, it's a mess. It's got a lot of problems to it, but let's kind of take each aspect and talk about how everything was. I thought that the direction of the movie was fine. The writing of this film, I think, is where a majority of the problems occur, because a lot of the comedy just isn't very funny, and the third act is a complete mess. There's so many issues and problems that plague the third act because it's not unique. It's incredibly boring and stilted, and it gets a little rough in the third act. The cinematography, whenever they weren't using a ton of CGI, looked phenomenal. A lot of the practical stuff looked better than most Marvel movies that have come out in the last 10 years. But it really lost me whenever there were a lot of CGI moments. I remember leaning over to my buddy during the scene when Kara ends up flying for the first time and just telling him, this PS4 cutscene looks great, because it looked like it was a PS4 cutscene. It didn't look any more realistic than that. The third act is where the CGI really started to show how bad it was, especially in the time travel stuff. That stuff looked really weird, and then there were a bunch of deep fakes, which I'm sure you've heard about, and those all looked incredibly strange and very uncanny valley. The acting, I thought, was, for the most part, pretty solid. Ezra Miller did a great job acting as Barry Allen. I thought Michael Keaton was fantastic. Sasha Cale was phenomenal as Kara. I really want to see more of her as we continue going, and I think that she's going to be a great addition, especially if they let her play Supergirl again. Ben Affleck was very enjoyable as Batman, as always, and the rest of the actors did a good job as well. The editing of the film was fine. I didn't have a problem one way or another with it. As far as the writing went, I know there were a lot of items that were set up that weren't really acted upon later. For example, at the beginning of the film, they really lean into Barry eats a ton, and he has this little meter on his wrist that tells him how much energy he has left, and when he runs out of energy, he can't go as fast. And that was super cool for that first action set piece, and then it's just dropped for the rest of the film. So there were some moments like that I felt weren't really played very well. The Flash was both better and worse than I expected. I was very hyped up for this film, and I thought it was going to be a lot better than it was. And there were some aspects of the film that I thought worked exceedingly well, like Michael Keaton as Batman and Sasha Cale as Kara. And then there were some things that they've been working on this movie for so long that they could have done so much better, like the CGI and a lot of the little writing pieces that could have just been polished a lot better. It felt a lot in the third act like the writers and the filmmakers realized that the DC was going to be rebooted, and so they just asked if they could do whatever they wanted. And the producers gave them full reign to do whatever they wanted without there needing to be consequences for anything, because a lot of the changes and things that happen in the third act just don't make sense. So The Flash was a fun but messy watch. After consideration, I think I would give it a 6.5 out of 10. Thank you all for listening. Have a great day. I will see you guys in the next video.